had requested to record. Thank you for reminding me, Kathleen. That's great. But the second aspect is to help all of the villages telling a story quantitatively, right? So we all know that sometimes villages rely on anecdotal experiences, right? Like this person, this volunteer helped this other great member, and that's wonderful story. So that's one case. But then if the numbers is the quantitative description of the services that are being done. For example, we want to know that we transport people to medical appointments. That's what we knew before. But if we have this taxonomy project, we could say, okay, from this date, from January 2021 to March 2021, we had 24 volunteers that transported 39 village members to medical appointments. So we have a more precise description of the story. And if we have more precise description, obviously this story is more credible for funders. So these are just a few examples Capitol Hill Village put together to explain the taxonomy project. So that's great. Move on to the next one. These are the different challenges that we faced, and we have been working on this for several months. Villages call the services in the way that it makes most sense for their members, and we think that is great. But then villages call the same services with different names across the country. So for example, the example that is given here is that a village would call a service lawn mowing, a different one would call it light landscaping, but those are two very similar things. The computer will have a hard time, making the similarity. But if we have a taxonomy, we can tell the computer that these two things are actually very similar. Okay, so this is the solution as proposed by Capitol Hill, agreeing on different categories. So basically, there is a basic common layer, which can be kind of the super categories of services, can be outdoor maintenance, indoor maintenance, disposal pickup, are kind of categories that all belong to this aggregation layer, which is house and home support. So this is just classification. Excuse me. And this is exactly very similar to what a librarian would do, right? It's classifying books maybe by sections of the library, and then the independent chapters. So basically, we're just classifying services of a village. And here again, I wanted to give them credit because I have not done any of this classification. This is really some work that has been done by Capitol Hill Village. I keep pressing the wrong button, so it's not good. Okay, so this is basically the result of the classification that Capitol Hill Village has done. So they had these categories: wellness support, transportation, independent support, professional services, diversity, equity, and inclusion, house and home support, volunteer engagement. And each one of those categories has these different subcategories that you can see on that screen. Can't believe that. Sorry. Okay, so that's the kind of the preliminary work that Capitol Hill Village had done. At one point, they discussed they set up a call with us and basically looked at the map and said, well, most of the villages in the District of Columbia, so all the villages you can see on this map, are using Healthful Village. So maybe we can apply this classification of services to all the villages that are using the same software. And we said, wow, that sounds amazing. So we were very excited with this project, and we said, okay, let's get started. Let's work together on this. Another thing that I wanted to say is that from our end, I was telling the story from where it started for Capitol Hill Village, but I also wanted to reconnect with Professor Andrew Sharlock, who was the professor at UC Berkeley that had done a lot of research on villages. He was also instrumental in helping me understand, because I'm coming from technology, but I didn't know anything about aging. So he helped me a lot in the very early days, and I wanted to pay him a tribute here, saying that the taxonomy project, as I see it, is also the fruit of his work also when he did all his research about villages, because it's the same goal. So just wanted to celebrate Andy Sharlock, that is now retired from Berkeley, unfortunately. So, but his contribution is still long lasting. Okay, so basically, now that we want to classify the services for villages, we have our different villages. Let's start with basically the DC area where we have these 11 villages, and we go basically step by step. We go to each one of them, asking them if they wanted to participate, if they agree to share the names of their village services, if they agree to share the name of their categories, and if they want to go through all these steps, then we can work with them to produce the report that I'm going to show in a minute. I think it's very important to make this clarification here, is that obviously Helpful Village has village information from a lot of villages, but we wanted to say here that we think our goal and our mission is to fiercely protect your data, right? Even if we have the data, we think it's super important that we keep that data private and safe. So what we're asking here is not villages to share all their data with other villages. It's like we're asking to share a tiny bit of data. So we want to protect the privacy of the villagers. So basically not share their names or their phones or their emails. None of that is necessary to get these aggregate data numbers. But it's really important that basically we all understand that we're sharing some data, but the smallest tiny piece of data that we can do. And as a part of our mission to protect the village data, we have set up a multi-level authorization process to participate in the taxonomy project. So Helpful Village customers know this slide. This is basically just a spreadsheet file we have, where basically we have step by step, we have the list of all our customers, all the villages, and basically we have the steps of management. So basically every time we go back to the executive director and say, okay, we send them an email asking them if they want to participate in the taxonomy project. If they want to participate, we ask them specifically if they want to share their service names and if they want to share their event categories names. And once they agree, we check these boxes, right? And then when they have checked these boxes, we send their service names to Capitol Hill Village, which is the next step. Capitol Hill Village is gonna, as you can see here, is gonna map those services. So basically they have the local names from the village and they're gonna give the taxonomy code to each one of the services that they send back to us. And Helpful Village team is entering those codes into the Helpful Village database. So the village has no work to do. So just the only thing you need to do is just authorize if you want us to do that, if you want to participate. If you want to participate, there's some, part of the work that is being done by Capitol Hill classifying, a lot of work, some work also that is done by Helpful Village, entering those codes into the system. And then if you agree to participate in your regional report, so this is the case for DC. So as you can see here, most of the villages had authorized. There are 2 that are migrating their data, so we are waiting a little bit on them, but basically this is how we manage it. And then now the intention here is to do the exact same thing for California. So we have been going to different California villages and asking them for all these authorizations and the possibility to build a regional report for California. So the taxonomy report exists today. So this is, I'm telling you the story from the beginning. So this is how the process goes. And I'm very happy to announce that basically we have reached a milestone and we can produce a common report for several villages in California. So we're talking about California. Obviously, we are able to add up the numbers for DC. We're able to add up the numbers for California. We can do it for any other region. We have a lot of the Columbus, Ohio villages that would be interested in doing another regional report for them. And then it's very easy for us, the code is already ready to do a national addition of these numbers. So here is where I'm also wanted to mention the Village to Village network that we are very happy to collaborate with on this project and on their data collection initiative, by which the goal would be to see if we can get these national numbers. So here I'm gonna make a parenthesis again, because there is some of the things that are going on at the national level. One of the things that is happening is that the new Biden administration seems to be much more friendly for, let's say, infrastructure or social service support, and also at-home services. So we hear that the federal government may be interested in the village model and concept, and potentially also funding it. Now, what has happened, if I understand, is that some of the policymakers have been asking, okay, we love the idea, we love the concept, but we need the numbers. we need to see how much are you doing, how many members do you have, what are the services that you're doing. And at that time, the movement was unable to provide those numbers because they are not that easy to collect. So hopefully through the taxonomy project and this data collection effort from B2B, we can set up these numbers so that basically the village to village network can go discuss with the federal administration and see if there is an opportunity for funding there. And that's also something that I'm very excited. So again, there's a tight connection between producing the numbers and future funding of villages. Okay, next thing, I wanted to reiterate that it's very easy to participate when you're a Helpful Village customer. So there is no work on your end, right? So you can still keep the name of your services that you have been using before. We're just going to add up another taxonomy designation in addition to what you already have. So there's no change there. The classification is being done by Capitol Hill Village. The codification into the system is done by Helpful Village that is also producing the report. So it's super easy. There are two steps to participate. One is authorized by email, so the whole authorization process that we mentioned before, and then we can take care of the rest, produce the report. So complexity is not the challenge here. It's just getting all of the village leaders together to make sure that this is what we all wanted to do. Great. So I guess you want to see the report. The DC taxonomy report is obviously available to them. So I'm not be showing that one. Actually, at the conference, I said I was showing some dummy example of the report. But here, I wanted to say today that of the 14 villages that are Helpful Village customers in California, 9 of them have already agreed to share the tiny slice of data of the service count on a California report. So that's another success and another report that we would be happy to show today. Before we go into the report, I wanted to maybe go into a little break or pause, so open up for discussion a little bit to make sure that we are all on board with these explanations. If there are questions, suggestions, or discussions, anyone can unmute, and then I'm happy to take questions or engage on a discussion before we discuss the report more precisely. Does anyone want to jump in?
I have a question, Manuel. This is Supriya Singh from the Foster City Village. We are not yet, we do not have Helpful Village at this time, but are looking into it. Okay. So potentially this taxonomy project, in fact, is very exciting to me. I'm very much a data person, and I think it's very, I would say, forward thinking of you to be doing this. My question is related to, so once you do this and you pool the data together, how much flexibility have you worked into the backend reports that each village can get? So for example, if I had to look at the reports, I could look at, could I look at like radiating out from my village X number of miles outwards? Because sometimes, having the whole of California may not make sense to me. Having the whole country may not make sense to me. I would want to look at maybe at just my county. Do you have you built in geographies? Yes. Or will you be able to, is there a plan to build in those geographies so I can make those cuts, either based on county or zip code and things like that?
Absolutely. So we have built some kind of a platform for managing this thing, and we call them aggregations, so just a collection of villages. We started geographically because that's how the villages were working, right? So the DC villages were working together. The California villages are meeting here today, but we can make this aggregation in any way we want. So for example, it would be, I think, meaningful to put together rural villages compared to city villages and compare them in a different way. So we can come up with an unlimited number of collections of villages, right, to compare with these numbers.
And I have another question to ride on this. So if I don't currently have Helpful Village, do I have scope to participate in the discussions?
Yes. It's a great question.
Is there a mailing list or something that I could get on?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great question. So I'm obviously talking from the Helpful Village perspective because that's where I work. But I think the taxonomy project is something that needs to be done for all villages, whatever technology they use. So it's not a requirement to be on Helpful Village. We have been, there is a data collection project by the Village to Village network, so at the national level, right? And they obviously, they're very interested in what we're done because we have achieved kind of this milestone, and it's something that they are really interested in. So basically they have come back to us. They are definitely supporting the Capitol Hill Village taxonomy because we want to have one taxonomy for the whole nation, right? So and then that it was started by Capitol Hill Village, but obviously invite for input for any other village that, you know, and apply that taxonomy nationally. What we have done here is that we went in first because we, as you said before, maybe we saw this before other people, or it was part of our vision or mission to do it. So we opened the path. Now, we also said to the Village to Village network that we're open to explain basically to other providers, let's say Club Express, how we did it, basically. And so we're really helping them to get to the same result. So potentially you can add up the numbers from Helpful Village with the numbers of Club Express if they agree to do that. So that definitely can be done. So I would say, if you're interested in the topic, the best thing to do is to contact the Village to Village network. So it's actually the president of the board of the Village to Village network that is in charge of this data collection task force. And then obviously we collaborate with them too. But basically that's kind of the organizational, you know, contact point in there. Now, obviously I can also say that everything is ready on Helpful Village today. Is what I'm saying. It's like we click on a button and the report comes out. We're inviting Club Express to do the same. And I think they will do it too.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. This is Larry Toy, and I'm president of La Miranda Village, but I also sit on the Village to Village Network board. So I can provide also a conduit if you'd like. Carol Paquette, who's our board president, has been taking the lead on this, and basically, just to elaborate a little bit on what Manuel said, right now you can roughly look at all of the villages in the country, and roughly speaking, a third or so are in Helpful Village, a third or so are in Club Express, and a third of those are in home-brewed systems, which basically use Excel or yellow paper or whatever they use to do their record keeping. And so it is a bit complex. Helpful Village makes it easiest because those of you who are in Helpful Village like we are, we basically give Manuel permission and it's done. However, the other ones, it's going to take more time. So we may end up doing this in stages because it's faster to do it with anyone who has a common system. And we have perhaps a third of our villages use their own system. So it's a little tricky. But the questions that Supriya asked are really important because we're looking at both national use of data, but also regional and even individual. If you're going to your local city with real data, rather than saying, you know, Mrs. Jones had this really good experience, and but the city council is interested more in, well, how many people in your community did you serve, and what did you provide them? And that was very meaningful for us this last year during COVID, and we had a lot of very positive responses from our city, our local cities.
Yeah, I wanted to say maybe one more thing. First, I agree with everything you said, Larry. So that makes a lot of sense. I want to say another thing about this report and give this example of what you're saying. Sometimes it can be used at a local level for the city. It was quite interesting where basically in Washington, D.C. it became kind of well known that this addition of village numbers was available. So the taxonomy report has already been used basically to show the impact of villages locally. And this connection of saying, well, potentially, because villages are doing so well here, we could consider giving them more missions and therefore more funding to do that. So basically, this is, I wanted to be very clear on that connection with the funding. That is something that has already happened. So basically, the office of the mayor of DC was interested in saying, okay, I know this report existed. We want to know those numbers. And because they knew those numbers, they were able to consider additional funding for different plans, emergency preparedness or other things. And I know Lisa has one question. So Lisa, you can basically pitch in. The other thing that I wanted to do before I give you the stage is that basically I'm obviously talking from a very tech or data sense. So obviously my job is to produce the report. What's happening with that report after that is something that you know more about that than myself, right? How those reports can be used for your grants or for your discussions at the local or state level, etc. So if anyone wants to discuss that second part that I will not be discussing myself because not my natural area, obviously Elisa or anybody else is invited to jump in and comment on that because it's not my preferred spot. Lisa, I think you wanted to raise your hand.
Yeah, I just have one question. Just having looked at different villages and their data, something as simple as rides, right? Because rides seems to be like the hot spot for most of us. How are you going to break out a ride transportation for medical transportation, for transportation for an event, way of looking at it. But when it comes to using that data to, for instance, installation through their programs, those rides to events become something important, right? Or ride to medical to show how we're supporting the healthcare. So are you going to also, take out, because it's easy to consolidate, but it's harder to because I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question because more precise we are, the more that's basically that classification. As I said, I think that's the way it should be, right? It's not my job to basically classify the services. So today is Capitol Hill Village doing it. I think we started basically to get the process going, etc. And then we received some feedback. We have been sending them village services of a number of villages. Christina, you can correct me maybe, but I think in addition to the 9 villages in DC and the 9 villages in California, we actually have opened the process nationally. We have about 50 villages that have agreed to participate in the program already. And then basically what we did is we sent all those services to Capitol Hill. It's like, hey, this village here in New Mexico, in Portland or anything, they are calling this service this way. How does it match your classification? And they're sending us a code. So what I'm telling you is that it's not, on my, in my way of doing it. I can show you what they have done. So I can, do that in the, before in the next meeting, but they broke down that in different categories, kind of medical, errands or stuff like that. Now, is that precise enough? Maybe not. What's interesting is that for me, taxonomy is alive. You see what I'm saying is that I think there should be some sort of a committee where basically you can ask the very same question you asked today. It's like, oh, maybe we need more detail on this classification, and that can always be done along the way. So I would say that we have a taxonomy version 1, and if we need more detail, we can go into a taxonomy version 2.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if if someone that is experienced with kind of more funding sources or how evidence-based and data-based can be helpful for funders wants to jump in. I think it would make sense because I'm not from that space. I don't know if someone feels comfortable doing that.
Let me make a comment. I think Andra, someone has a question on chat. And so if you want to answer that, Manuel.
Yes, so I was not looking at the chat, so thank you, Larry. So I can read it for everybody, I think.
Yes.
Question from Andra Lichtenstein, that if I remember well is Ashby Village. If you use Helpful Village, can you pull your own data from the system, or does that have to be done by Helpful Village if you are responding to a specific funder? So it's a good question. So basically, the short answer is yes, you can pull your own data. So Helpful Village has different levels of reporting. The most basic one is just spreadsheet files of all the service requests that you have been doing. And that gives you even the names, the emails, the times, the service. So you can run a detailed report and work on your Excel yourself to produce any number that you want. We have other reports that are basically this impact report, as we call it. We have a one-pager report that's kind of, if you're meeting with your mayor, if you want to hand them a one-page report, you can also do that, and we calculate that one for you. We have a report that is called a board report. Is what you would do, what I would do basically if I was going to a monthly meeting of my village, and that's giving you the trends. Are you doing, for example, with COVID was very interesting. Suddenly there was a big drop of transportation rides for a while, and then there was more grocery deliveries and other things. So that's kind of a board report that does it. So we have multiple reports. You have the straight data in spreadsheet files. You have a one pager, you have a board report, and this taxonomy report, which is just the top level, just kind of categories of services with count. So the short answer is yes, you can run any numbers you want. Obviously, here the challenge is that we just want to make it easy. Like if we want to do a taxonomy report for a region, in my opinion, it should be a one-click effort for you, right? Because we don't want to leave out some villages just because they don't have the time to do all the Excel work that it would be required for them to do. So you can definitely do it yourself manually, but we also offer you a possibility to do a one-click report. Supriya, yeah.
Yeah, so my other question is, do you have a timeline for this? Or are we just sort of moving at the sort of
the timeline is I love that question. So the timeline is we're in. As I said before, the taxonomy report for DC, it has already been used in government sessions to ask for additional funding for villages and to show the impact of villages. So that is already working. Now, what we're doing today is saying, okay, the same thing that DC did successfully and leading them to more funding, we think it would be such a great idea to do the same thing in other areas. So we just came here in California and say, hey, if you want to do this, we can produce the exact same reports, because from a software perspective, we just needed to code it once. And the good thing is that we coded for DC, but now we can use it for California if you want to do it. So the next kind of step in your timeline, Supriya, it's just talking with village leaders. It's like, do we want to do this? Do we want to put these numbers together in the same bucket? If we produce this report, what do we do with it, right? It's like, I'm obviously, in my view, it goes to the village directors, right? And then from there, you need to discuss and decide, well, I think it could be used in this context, in this framework, etc. But all this business use obviously gets out of my hands, goes more to you, to what you think that could be done. Does it answer the question?
Hey, Manuel, if you have permission already from, I think you said nine California villages, you can actually start producing something for those villages so they could have something tangible to actually look at to see, how helpful that might be, right?
Big time. I mean, that a great question.
That's
Lisa.
now, right?
I mean, I need to tell you that they have already authorized the report can be sent in 5 minutes to the village executive directors, and they know what the sum of 9 villages is doing. Yeah, so we can show some of it if you want. So we're talking about the report. I can basically show you the PDF if you all want. I can share my screen again. And then basically it looks like this, right? So there is a report for the 12th last month with a number of villages that are using Helpful Village. The first thing that appears on this report is just the evolution of members. So it's quite interesting here, where basically you can see the addition of these 9 villages has produced today 1,800 members. And this is also interesting to see the evolution over the last 12 months. Obviously, the last year has been complicated with COVID and pausing village activity and then restarting. I think it's very interesting here to see that for the last 4 months, there are village members signing up again because people want to go back to life again and then do more. So villages are now growing in their numbers. We have 2 curves here. The blue one is the active members in villages. So as I said before, 1,800. The lower line here is the number of active volunteers, which even if it's in a bottom curve, is already 1,100 volunteers, which is quite interesting because the number of volunteers has remained quite constant over time, where the number of members has evolved in a different way over the last 12 months. So you have the data numbers here. So what I'm excited about is that about 2 things I would say. First is that now we're talking numbers, right? So we are more precise about the way we tell our story. Like you can see the numbers like in November, in December, in January, for example, in January 2021, there was 1,700 members in villages. If you look at October 21, there was 1,800 members and then 1,100 volunteers. The second thing that I'm excited about is that because we're adding up the impact of multiple villages, then we're able to show a bigger number, right? So suddenly, if we are talking with I don't know, if you want to take this document to a foundation or the state or whatever other your representative or something, you can show numbers that are way bigger. Now we're talking not only in the hundreds of members, which is kind of a more popular number for villages, but we're talking in the thousands. So when you're talking in the thousands, that makes it easier for you, for villages basically, to have a seat at the table saying, hey, I'm representing, if you look at this number here, we could almost say 3,000 people, right? And now obviously we have more villages. This is not even all the Helpful Village customers. So we could have more, and there are others that are not using. So maybe now we'll start talking, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000. So, and these are actual numbers. So I think that's the other thing. It's like this gives villages more weight on those discussions. The other thing that I wanted to show you is not only the evolution in number of members, but basically here is the different services that have been done. So so we have here there are 5 different super categories of services, right? So the aggregated layers that Capitol Hill came up with. So basically house and home support, independent support, transportation, volunteer engagement, wellness supports. And here we have the number of services. So now we can suddenly say that over the last 12 months, the 9 California villages that are being shown here have done 13,000 services. So here again, now the numbers get big, right? Because we are all talking about a collective effort. So there is almost 40,000 services during the last 12 months. So now I think this, when you go and say 40,000 services that have been done in I think it's just easier to get funding. So this is the number of services completed. And here on the right-hand side, a number of hours served. You have a pie chart showing these different numbers. I mean, just the partition of the services. And then for each one of these super categories, right? House and home support, independent support, transportation. Then we have here like the subcategories, right? So house and home support includes home systems maintenance and repair, indoor, house and yard maintenance, outdoor, with different charts over the last 12 months, a pie chart. Same thing for independent support, is kind of the subcategories in there. And same thing for transportation, Lisa, because I know it was your question about, riding for Kaiser and other things. So I know we have today this driving for nutritional groceries, driving for health and medical purposes, and then driving for a third possibility. So basically we have just a breakdown of those categories and just a total number. Now, obviously, Lisa, back to your question again, is this enough detail? Maybe or maybe not. And if it's not, then basically we need to, engage in a conversation with the committee, with Capitol Hill, saying, can we have more subcategories inside the transportation category? So all that is a good reason to, organize around, some sort of committee or working with B2B about how can we fine tune this development. From my perspective, what's interesting is that villages will do whatever classification they think best fit. But then if they classify their services, they apply a taxonomy code to each one of those services, we can produce this report because it's already connected basically from the technical point of view. So yeah, that's it. So basically, I mean, there's a lot of excitement for the taxonomy report, but it's a PDF file. So that's all. No, there's no animations or videos or stuff like that. So that's where we're at.
How fast did it take you to do that?
Yeah.
How much time was consumed?
Yeah, so Ricky is next to me here. He's asking about how much time did it take us to get here. So, and there's definitely some tech work because basically we have a reporting system that is connecting to each individual village and asking just this tiny slice of data, right, about their services and the taxonomy code, the number of hours that is being done, put them together in a a central calculation service, and then put a PDF together. So yeah, there is some coding in there. But the other thing that took a lot of time is actually basically the coordination, right? So we have spent several meetings. We have monthly meetings with helpful village users, and we have been explaining what is the taxonomy project. Taxonomy is a word that is a little weird. How were we moving along? Why are we asking for the service descriptions? Why would it be interesting to have their numbers? The authorization process takes us a lot of time. So, and I actually say that, but I actually should thank Christina, because Christina is basically the one that is tracking all those emails, contacting each individual village director and saying, well, do you want to participate? Can we use your service names? Can we use your accounts, etc.? So all that authorization is very important. And I want to spend some more time there, because for us, the bigger complexity of this project is not necessarily kind of technically, right? Because we're good at producing reports and mixing up data, but just making sure that everyone is comfortable with this collective effort, right? And one of the things that is most important to me is just saying that we fiercely protect the privacy of your members. Like if this taxonomy report contains no names, no emails, you don't see what Mrs. Smith or Mr. Dupont has been doing, etc. It's just a collective number. So I would say just the coordination of the whole effort has been a lot of work. The authorization is a lot of work. Technically, it's kind of reasonable. And then by this also, I wanted to thank Christina for all the operational work. I wanted to also thank all the villages that accepted to participate in this effort, because obviously we could do nothing of this if we, if our helpful village users were not authorizing and agreeing to do the same. So thank you for everyone participating. This being said, I think Mary Cruz from Petaluma village raised her hand. So Mary Cruz, if you want to come in.
Hi, Manuel. My question is, I know you said it's ready now, but is this going to be a report that we request from you, or is it just going to be on our reports page and we click a button and we'll have the options to enter the dates? And then also, is it, so I guess if it is that way, then it would be live numbers, or, is it for up till the end of last month, or how's that work?
Absolutely. Great question, Mary Cruz. Thank you. So basically it's kind of not real time, but basically at the beginning of each month, basically we report the numbers basically to the hub, I would say. So basically at the beginning of the month, the numbers of the previous month become available. So Mary Cruz, as you know, right, you have the impact report numbers, and the port report numbers become available, on the first or second of the month for the previous month. So and it's not real time there. Now, what's really interesting about your question, right, is that for me, kind of my part of the work of producing the report ends here. Now, this is where basically I was trying to open up the conversation, saying, well, if we had this report and technically it's ready and available, is it useful to you, the villages, right? How would you use it? Would you use it locally? Would you use it, as a group? Or do you think, for example, I can tell you what they did in DC, which I like mentioning. I'm sorry to mention DC so much, but I've seen it working, and basically I see the results where they got more funding, where they got their report being used, is that, well, they have these DC villages collaborative, basically, where basically they meet from time to time, the village leaders, and then they say, okay, we would like to have this report, because this report, we could send it to the Department of Aging, and then if we send it to the Department of Aging, we'll receive more funding. And we know that there is the office of the DC mayor that has a meeting on Tuesday, And if we can show our numbers there, it would be great. So now this is basically an invitation to California villages saying, this is available, this is ready. We're happy to produce those numbers, but we're also basically want to partner with you on saying, how can we help you with this? If these numbers are useful to you, how can we send them? How, just let us know if you're working together. Obviously, today is a Bravo meeting, which is great. I know there is Village Movement California. I sent an email saying that we're open to collaborate with whatever organization that represents a collection of villages, right? Because we have the data, but we feel it's not my job to basically do the, I don't know, just taking the report to the representatives or the state or any of that. I'm happy to give you the report and then you defend it in any way you want. So this is where I wanted to basically, sit down and basically say, do you think this is useful? If we send this one to you and you let us know how you would use it and get us excited, we think it's great. So just this is where I basically where my path stops, and I basically stop saying, well, I have this report. Do we send it to all the leaders? Where do we send it? Is there a plan to use that report? And this is basically where I'm listening more than talking.
Okay, but the report is going to be something you're gonna send to us, not listed on the reports page where we just click a button.
Yeah, we want to make it available. Basically, the deal, what we ask is that the villages that are participating in the report, they have access to that report. Okay. So today you need to request it and we send it, right? Then we can make it available so that you can download it when you want also. But okay. Yeah, in my view, it's like, it's your report from there. You agreed to participate on it. So you want it, we send it to you, and we want to make it available to you on the platform too. Great question, Mary Cruz, thank you.
Thanks.
Dave, I think you had a question.
Yeah, first of all, let me say that this information across multiple villages is impressive. It's a very hard thing to do. So what you've done here is amazing. My question is, there's other information in the village besides services and membership that are of value across multiple villages, such as touch point, events, calls, etc. Is that in the works, or is that something that's being thought about?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Dave. So Dave from SLO Village, I guess everyone knows Dave. Definitely, this doesn't stop here. So we are also going, I can tell you about the next step. So something Capitol Hill Village is currently doing is that they're doing a taxonomy for the event categories, right? So you can have events that are educational events or health training events or just social events, etc. So we would do the exact same thing we did for services, right? Integrated them in the report. Actually, our tech is already ready to show that in the same report. So events is what's coming next. And I agree with you, Dave. There is more that is being done. We presented at the national conference. For example, I think that the phone check-ins are very important. I think that the village conversations or discussion boards are very important, and they should be counted. We're already counting them in the impact report, right, and the board report that our customers have for internal use. And for me, I have basically a classification of this sector of services for villages. They will be added to the report. So the report, the taxonomy report, I said it existed, but it will also evolve over time to add more aspects of it. So that's what I wanted to say. Also, it's kind of Dave's question, but also Supriya's previous question. I think it would be great for California villages to integrate the national task force for the data collection, those that are interested in participating in that. I think there is an important aspect of, Capitol Hill is classifying, but basically I think we could formulate some input, as Lisa was saying before, right? Saying, okay, maybe do we need more detail here or stuff like that? And all those things start already, I think at the V2V network level, because that classification, is done by villages. So if you are interested in the topic, Dave or Supriya or anybody else, you can definitely contact Larry, Toy, or Carol about that task force. And then obviously, when that classification changes and more data points are suggested, and actually I can tell you there is already more data points, right? The village to village network has already come back to us saying, oh yeah, this is great, the services and events that you're doing. But for example, one thing, I can tell you another thing that they wanted to do is just kind of have a taxonomy for the membership types, right? So if it's, I don't know, just social or full membership or householder, etc. So there are more classification, and so that classification, as I said, happens outside of Helpful Village, but we love that classification because it allows us to produce the numbers. It's a great question. Thank you, Dave. Is anybody else coming in? Larry.
Yes, one thing that we're starting to do, and there's some interest, we're actually just are appointing some new board members, and one very interesting potential, which I think some villages have started looking at, but again, collectively it may be much more powerful nationally, is collaborations with hospitals, particularly hospital chains, where national data will be very interesting to them. For example, if they partner with a local village and prevent patients who have had various services at their hospital from having to redo the services. Right now there are very significant penalties that hospitals have to pay. Many of you know that with the new rules in Medicare. If you have to go back and have to have the service repeated. And one of the things they're looking at is how do we reduce the amount of readmissions. And one of the things that we've been talking about is, can we provide data for them that if they partner with villages, they can help keep the patients from coming back to the hospital. And that means it becomes a very interesting financial aspect for them to say, that makes a lot of sense economically. And many of these, like Humana and United Healthcare and some of the others, which have very large numbers of hospitals across the country. We haven't started talking with Kaiser, but we have started initially at La Miranda Village with our regional hospital about this possibility. But the more villages that participate, the more data we have, the better we can go to a big hospital chain and say, look, here's what we have. These are exactly the patients that will cost you a lot of money if they have to go back to the hospital. That's our membership. And so I think we found that they respond very well to bottom line issues. And so they're saying, okay, we're willing to pay to save us money, basically.
Yeah, big time. Definitely, readmission rates is a big one. There is another one that is quite frequent and actually happened already. First, just Kaiser in the past called us once, which was a big surprise to me. And they were doing a project. We're not talking to them anymore at this point, but punctually they were interested in community health. So we know Kaiser and other chains are naturally interested in the village's activities. One of the things they mentioned was important to them is just make sure that their patients go to their medical appointments, and villages play a key role there. So something that we're considering is that, hey, for every ride you give to a patient to the hospital, we can compensate the village, because the fact that you're bringing them here saves us money because they are not missing their medical appointments and they don't have medical complications. So it's not that far to get these medical providers interested in the data. But again, obviously, when we're talking to them, we need to produce the numbers. We need to say, okay, well, this happens, 3,000 times. So basically, if we do, I don't know, $1 times 3,000 or $10 times 3,000, etc. All those numbers depend on that. But the connection with the medical healthcare system is quite immediate for readmissions, but even just the medical appointments are super important. So that's a great point, Larry. And then I think, Lisa, you raised your hand, so you want to come in?
Yeah, just real quick, because I know we're hitting our time. I think so if I were still looking at this data, because Marin, we consolidated, right, based on 6 different villages. So we kind of had our mini taxonomy project going all the time. I think what's really important is to start maybe showing us what some of these reports look like that help people, then it generates questions. So to medical, obviously we started tracking where we were going. So we were able to get our own taxonomy around Kaiser, right? So, but to get the Kaisers within North Bay, right, back to the geography issue, because that's where the funding is. It's mostly kind of local and regional, but to have the benchmark available is really important. So to see that, you know, and then some of the things I think your reports might be useful to have on them is how many villages are comprising, these numbers are comprising of how many villages. So out of 9 villages, you know, we're about behaving the same as the other villages. So the trends, the benchmarks are there. I think, you know, that's kind of just a beginning process that we have to go through to really figure out where we want to put most of our efforts, because it might be in that social isolation and transportation, and we might not really care as much about some of the, I'm going to say the chores, because there might not be money there, right? So if, to the extent that you can start producing things that people can look at and then start to question, that would be great.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think we need to produce the data. I think, and then based on the data, see how we can change or have a modified report that is tailored to a specific need. But I also think it's very important that we go first with a very simple report, which that's what I like about the taxonomy report. I understand, and Dave mentioned this before, right? And then Lisa, you're kind of saying the same, kind of, well, we could have more details or we can have other data points that would be interesting. And I agree with that. But I think we should do both things at the same time. I think we should try to have as many villages as possible on a very simple report, right? Which is that, hey, just let's add up numbers of members, of volunteers, and of general layer services. And that gives big numbers that can be useful in some context. And at the same time say, okay, that's one report. It's kind of, okay, it's kind of not very detailed, but we have big numbers, so that's good. Now let's have also another more detailed report on the site. So it's a second report, but I think it's very important also to have as many villages doing the very simple report that is, that is basically available. We can have, just have as many participants in the project. I think it's also a, added value. Lisa, you wanted to add some more? No, okay. Perfect. And I wanted to be mindful of the time, and I know people may probably have other meetings, etc. So I don't know if you want to do one last meeting, one last question, and then we close the session, or what do you guys think? Rick, maybe you.
Well, I think number one, what's really coming very, very important here is to take what you've done on the 9 and get it out to the 9. And there should be 5 more there that would wish that they were getting it.
Yeah.
So because there's education in it, in the way we can do things going forward. So getting that out is just a step, and we need to move rapidly on that so that they can feel it and touch it and think about it. And then at the same time, that there's other pieces coming that are being worked on, and that's in the next wave of this thing. So and V2V in the middle of it is kind of the right place. So I'm all for it. I think this is a good way to start.
Of the situation, I cannot say it any better, so I will not say a word. The last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to thank Catherine, that is also on the other side of the table.
Yes.
Because as you all know, she's a brilliant director for La Morinda Village, and also she helped put this event together so that this could not have happened if Catherine was not helping us here. So wanted to thank you all for your time. I don't know, I'm gonna put my email address on the chat, but it's very simple. It's manuel@helpfulvillage.com. If you don't have time to copy that email address, you can also go online to www.helpfulvillage.com, leave us a message, and then you have additional questions, you want to discuss about any other things, you can definitely contact our team. And as I said before, also the Village to Village Network. So thank you all. Thank you, California. Thank you, the sunny weather here. And then talk to you soon.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.